live and armed. You're listening to the Joe Whitehead Show, and you can join in our conversation at 430-2428. Waiting patiently on the line is Collier County School Board member and I'd say very faithful and honest and honorable public servant, Erika Donalds. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's good to be with you on this rainy Saturday.
Oh, it is. And by the way, in studio, not only do we have our man of action, Doug Rankin, but we have Chris Quackenbush, who's a candidate in Lee County. She's in here joining us because we got a lot to talk about today.
Good morning, Doug and Chris. I'll appreciate all you guys are doing.
Good morning, and I'm glad to see a little inter-county cooperation here, which is not a violation of the Sunshine Law, and we can all gang up on the state and get them to get rid of some of this extra testing and extra bureaucracy.
Well, Erika Kelly and I have
together.
Yeah, we have worked together in the past and are locking arms for the future.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Well said. Erika, what's going on? Keith Flaw came on the show earlier, talked about some of these budget issues, increases in the millage rate for purposes of increasing the school budget. What's up with that? He mentioned you attempted at the meeting to address it, and they weren't giving you any traction.
Yes, absolutely. The state did hand out some tax increases that we are required to charge, local property taxes, in order to increase the per-student funding. That goes to the operational fund, which would pay for resources, teacher salaries, all of our instructional materials. So we're not talking about the increases in funding that could go, depending on the district's decisions, to the classroom. What we're talking about that's locally controlled is to the capital fund, which pays for the buildings and the maintenance of those buildings. Now, as you recall, we just increased the impact fee from 50%, which is what we had it during the downturn, to a full 100%. That's our recommendation to the commission. But, however, we're not building new schools. We're maintaining the existing schools, and we're already spending over 22% more per student than the average Florida county to maintain our existing buildings. My position was that we do not need more money to do that than we did last year, and therefore, from the capital perspective, we should keep the taxes the same dollar amount from our citizens, not raise it just because we can.
No, listen, first of all, that's a great point because to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, still to this day, there has not been a very, very serious look at the infrastructure, the personnel infrastructure of our school system and the determination as to whether or not we are, in fact, as heavily overweighted with administrative help as we allegedly are. And if that is the case, the first place that we should be looking to make changes in the budget or what we spend or how we spend it is there.
Well, I think that what we get from our citizens, the taxpayers who fund this, is they want funding to go into the classroom, and they don't mind paying for results. So as Keith mentioned earlier, if we have an analysis of how much we're putting into our classrooms and into our teachers, and we see that that is resulting in better student performance in academics and higher success rates when our students are leaving here and going to college or career, then that's a different story. We're talking about these pretty lavish school buildings that we have here in Collier County with flat screen televisions across the cafeterias displaying vegetables and fruit. And that's where the money that our citizens do not want to put more money into that fund until they can see that that money is actually giving them a return. Thus far, all we see are some pretty expensive buildings that are not really translating necessarily into student performance. At a time like this, when people are just coming out from being underwater in their homes, they're not getting more income to pay for these huge tax increases. And so I feel that we should leave that in the pockets of our citizens.
Although I do have to say, Erika, I did appreciate when I had to visit recently the Martin Luther King building, otherwise known as the Taj Mahal recently. I did appreciate the valet parking that I got.
Yeah.
Doug Lewis has been doing a lot of research on this from Collier County. He's a fantastic volunteer who has 4 children in the Collier system. And he was comparing districts for the amount of money they spend per pupil. That's easy to say. And in Collier, they're spending over $22,000 per student. In Lee, they're spending $14,444. And in Seminole, it's about $11,000. And guess who scores best? Seminole.
Wow.
So it is definitely not related to the amount of money. It's what you are learning. And we've got to get back to job one in the schools, what our students are learning.
Let me ask Erika this question. Erika, you heard the numbers, and I'm sure you've seen these. Why is our budget per student so much higher than so many of these other counties in Florida?
Well, that number includes all of our debt service, includes all of our capital funding, which I just mentioned is extremely high for students. So that's where a lot of those increases are. And as Keith mentioned as well, a lot of that our increase over other counties is in a, quote, instruction. At least that's how it's classified by the district. But what we need to do is not so much necessarily if we're going to spend more instruction, but what is the return to our students, really, and to the taxpayers who are paying for it. So we had actually suggested a budget committee that would report to the board. You know, we have so many retired CFOs, CEOs, people who have been in the financial industry as I have for many, many years, and we would love to tap into those and have them dig into this budget and let us know as a board what are the things that they feel that we should be looking closely at. But that was actually rejected by the board majority, saying that it could get politicized. So for someone who deals with numbers every day, I don't see politics in the numbers. Either it's increasing 14,000% year over year, as we do have at least one line item in our budget, or it's not. And if it is, why and how should we be looking at this? What shift in procedure and policy is putting forth these kinds of big variances year to year? That's what a budget committee could do for us. Unfortunately, right now, we have a board majority that doesn't feel that that's necessary.
You know, and it's so sad because in essence, what they just, if that's, as you put it, they're claiming this could be politicized. I think the fact that they don't want to be accountable to the public and explain where our money is being spent, why and how, is in itself a politicization. It's making a political statement that the public doesn't matter. We're going to do what we want. That's a political statement in and of itself.
I think they can try and ignore you and Kelly, but if they had a lot of CEOs and CFOs saying the same thing, that would be pretty hard to ignore. So they don't want anybody who with a lot of credibility getting in there and repeating essentially, because I assume that's what's going to happen, because I know you and Kelly are right on the money with most of these items. And they don't want people with some really good horsepower behind them backing you all up and making them look silly.
Well, elections make a difference, and I surely hope that we can get you at least one more person to join so that you have a majority and you're able to make these positive changes you've indicated. You know, Lee County is also doing our budgets at this time, as well as all the other counties are. We have a specific timeline we have to follow that is gauged again by our big bully brother in the state. And we have the same issue in Lee County with budget increases that they say, well, your millage rates are going down, but the money is going up. So your actual tax rate, the dollars that we pay, are going up. And that is unconscionable in this day and time when most of our residents are on a fixed income. We have to stand up for them, and we know that the money is really not the problem. There are a couple of major budget issues in Lee County that we're looking at, and one of the things that Lee County does uniquely is we send our kids from one end of the county to the other free of service, and we have choice countywide. Well, if we only had choice in our neighborhood area, in our local district, and then we had people, if they wanted to go outside of that zone, if they had to pay for it, then they could. And that would reduce our cost by about $25 million a year.
Wow.
One school a year we could build. Not to mention the $110 million we're paying for computer tests and testing alone.
Testing's a whole other animal. Eric, I want to ask one question to you in this final segment of our segment here. You mentioned something to me that's kind of not on the radar screen, but it's emerging. It's called blue zones. And it has to do with, from what I understand, the imposing of some sort of Agenda 21 type standards onto local government again.
Well, interestingly enough, on Tuesday in the board comments, which is well after the public comments, it's not a time where we're supposed to be making decisions because it's not an agenda item. The superintendent, actually the board chair, and then the superintendent discussed the Blue Zone Initiative, which is basically a well-being, wellness initiative that's spearheaded by NCH. And some of the things are great. You're talking about walkability of neighborhoods and promoting a healthy lifestyle. All of that is wonderful. But what the Blue Zone Initiative also does is try to get local governments, including the schools and including the county commission, city councils, to enact policies that pretty much force the healthy choices. We're talking about, there was one in the newspaper banning new fast food companies from coming in, making it more difficult for people to obtain junk foods, whether it be in the grocery stores, and making it less convenient or whatever. That's where you start to see a shift in the mindset of many of our citizens. Yes, I like the blue zone concept, but I want to continue to make that an individual choice and individual responsibility. When it comes to the school board, in order to be a true blue zone, the school board does have to change policies to comply with the Blue Zone Initiative. I've been doing a lot of research on this, hearing from a lot of people once I mention it and put it out there. And, before we change policy and dedicate resources to something like this, we need to hear from the people that we represent and that we serve that this is something that they want, because there's an opportunity cost to every initiative. And the more focus we have on Blue Zone, the less focus we're going to have on the academics that I feel is the number one importance in our classroom.
Oh, amen. Look, if the school system itself is struggling with just test scores and academics, they have no business dictating lifestyle and business and commerce to the community around them. I mean, to me, when you say the blue zones and describe it, it sounds like blue zone equals brown shirt enforcement. That we're going to get down to you will eat broccoli and you will like it.
Well, what's really important, though, Joe, is that this goes through the proper process. As of right now, the school district has already committed to 4 pilot schools in the Blue Zone Initiative, but it has never come before the board, never had any kind of public input or hearing, and that has a big concern for me, because I look at the Blue Zone Initiative for schools, and there are policy and resources involved. That means that it should be a board-level decision. And so far, there's just been a casual mention of it in the end of a school board meeting.
Wow.
But from what I hear, it's already going on in the schools. The process is very important to protect the people and their interests, and I want to make sure that this is actually coming for the board before any more action is taken.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this up, and I tell you what we're going to do is we're up against a break. You and I will do a follow-up conversation hopefully next Saturday about this specifically, along with some budget issue updates, so that we can be, tuning in our listeners to what's actually going on here, because unfortunately some of this doesn't make it to the front page.
Yeah, with the budget, Joe, let's make sure our listeners are calling and emailing their school board members, because there is another final vote on this in September. If you don't want them to increase your taxes, you have to let them know.
Amen. Well said, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Hopefully you and I will talk about this next Saturday as well. And keep up all the good work you're doing on behalf of the people in Collier County.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. With that said, we're going to take a quick time out for our sponsors. When we come back, Doug and Chris and I will be talking to a gentleman named Chris Castle of LIFA, Legal Immigrants for America, and how that impacts our whole community and what illegal immigration is doing to not just the border, but the interior. Back in a flash, folks. See you then.